Well, happy Friday, everyone. Josh's severe weather, and I hope you have a great weekend lined up here. Beautiful fall weather here in the eastern United States. We call this severe clear. I just haven't seen any clouds today. And here, where I live in Raleigh, our first frost of the season on my part of town. But we are here to talk about the tropics and an evolving situation in the Caribbean. We've been tracking two areas here, one of which a couple of weeks ago looked like it may try to threaten the Gulf. That, of course, not the case now, but we may be seeing Nadine forming here in the next day or so very quickly before landfall in the Western Caribbean. Another system which I thought could become Nadine is taking its time north of Puerto Rico, but that is still going to impact those of you in the islands this weekend. So I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh area, and I'm here to kind of break things down for you. No hype here. We're just here to talk about what's going on and who's going to be impacted and why you need to care. So Nadine likely forming here soon. At the very least, a tropical depression, but we are probably going to have tropical storm watches and warnings issued as this system begins to develop here and heads towards Belize and the southern Yucatan Peninsula. We will possibly see tropical storm watches and warnings. We'll have to see what the National Hurricane Center does here. But this system beginning to show signs of organization today. We continue to watch this other area, which I thought maybe would have a chance of becoming Nadine. I don't think it happens at this point, but it could still briefly get to a tropical depression or storm if a circulation does in fact form with it. So we're going to talk about both of those. First, I do want to walk you through what's happening here this weekend across the United States. As you can see here, a nice dry air mass in place across the eastern United States, big area of high pressure centered over West Virginia and Appalachia. And we do have low pressure well offshore the East Coast, a little bit windy across Florida and the Gulf region, but we have a front pushing south. And believe it or not, an interesting setup in the southwestern U.S. I've been watching Flagstaff, Arizona. Remember how hot it was last month across Arizona? Today they're dealing with thunderstorms and a winter weather advisory for some higher elevation snow tonight. And significant snow for the first time this season in the higher elevations of the Southwest. We could even see a little bit of severe weather across portions of Arizona, New Mexico, southern Colorado, and even West Texas. That system is eventually going to move out onto the plains early next week. It will weaken as it does so, and the Northwest will have another system moving in this weekend, which will track across southern Canada. And there's definitely colder air coming in with that storm. We'll probably see some snow a little bit farther south here across Quebec and Ontario, and some mountain snow even in parts of New England. But overall, this is a pretty quiet weather pattern continuing through the month of October. It's going to warm right back up. I talked to some of my friends in Dallas, and they were well into the 90s up until a couple days ago, dropping into the 70s today, but it's going to be back up to near 90 by the middle of next week. So the cold just not lasting very long yet, although we are 43 days away from the end of hurricane season, 43 days, I believe, and 43 days away from meteorological winter, which happens December 1st. So winter is coming. Let's take a look at the tropics. Well, first, sorry about that. First, we're going to look at severe weather, and there is a chance, it's a small one, but a 2% chance of some severe wind over eastern New Mexico primarily, maybe sneaking into the panhandles here late tonight and around the Four Corners region as well. Tornadoes are possible. Strong winds and certainly some hail will be possible as well. Tomorrow, that threat will continue over eastern parts of New Mexico, and I would not be shocked if we saw a few tornadoes tomorrow. I think the chasers from Oklahoma will be heading out in that direction, wrangling those tornadoes, but not a major outbreak at this point. And I think by the end of the weekend, things quiet down. We are seeing snow, though, across the Intermountain West, especially across Utah here tonight. The potential to see 8-9 inches of snow in the higher elevations, and in southwest Colorado, maybe even up to a foot here. But it'll be short-lived. By the time we get into Sunday and Monday, most of that snow will be gone and melting. So a pretty quick-lived storm at this point. Now, in the tropics, a whole lot of areas that we're investigating, but nothing at this point that is a named system. Pretty quiet here for the middle of October. The two areas in the Atlantic I'm going to talk about here in a second. We do have an invest here southwest of India across the Arabian Sea, and another one in the southern Indian Ocean, and one that doesn't look to develop here over the western Pacific east of the Philippines. And we're going to be watching the Mexican coastline, but nothing really looking super threatening at this point. Now, closer to home, those of you in the Caribbean do need to be watching, especially this area in red. It has been bumped up to a 70% chance for development as we start to see low pressure that is starting to gather more and more near its center. It's been very broad, very disorganized, but today we're starting to see some consolidation. It's not there yet, but Right now, we are seeing the possibility of a quick tropical depression or storm that could form either overnight tonight or Saturday and then make landfall Saturday night. So those of you in Belize, the north coast of Honduras, eastern Guatemala, and over the southern Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico should be monitoring. And you'll see here on this text that we may have tropical storm watches or warnings issued here later. We may have actually a potential tropical cyclone that eventually, if it consolidates quickly enough, could be a brief tropical storm. It probably will only be one for less than a day. After that, it's heading westward across Central America and more than likely crossing into the Pacific. By the way, this area we continue to watch here. The chance was down to 10%. It's come back up to 20. Again, it's not a favorable environment for this to strengthen much. Upper level winds are going to get stronger by early next week, but we still could have a brief tropical storm at some point tomorrow or early on Sunday near the north coast of Hispaniola, the Turks and Caicos, eastern Cuba, and the far southern Bahamas. But at this point, I do not expect this will be much of a system. It'll be a rainmaker and maybe some gusty winds, but really that's about it. You can see here what's going on the map here. This is our Invest 95L. The center is actually somewhere down in here, so it's pretty broad. There's another bit of a mid-level center here. This is Invest 94L, and you can see there's still thunderstorms with it. It's hanging tough, but this front here is going to stand in the way of it becoming any stronger, because what will happen is as that front moves from northwest to southeast, the wind shear is expected to increase later this weekend. So it will bring some rain here into parts of the Virgin Islands today, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola tonight, but really not anything to be super concerned with at this point. I never really thought it was going to be a big deal, but something we needed to be watching. Water temperatures, though, still support tropical activity, especially over this zone here. We're still running at 30 degrees Celsius or warmer, and that favors potential hurricanes if the conditions are right. You can see very much above average still over the entire Caribbean. The Gulf of Mexico averages do come down this time of the year, but still running a little bit mild. Same goes for the Southwest Atlantic. So we still have the support for something to survive. But what we don't have right now is overall rising air that's going to actually allow storms to grow. When we get to this Madden-Julian oscillation chart, everything on this side is pretty much against all odds of seeing really any significant storms. When we had Helene, we were in this phase here where there was rising air across the Caribbean. When we had Milton, kind of the same deal, we were in this zone here. And we are heading in that direction again. Right now, we're heading into phase 5. But as we wrap things up for the month of October, we start to move into a more favorable spot for development. And the first week or two of November, I would not be shocked to see a named storm or two. You could see that here on the European ensemble. The sinking air in brown certainly doesn't favor any widespread organization of any systems here. But as we move this along here into the end of October, the amount of sinking air does gradually subside, and we head into a rising motion setup here with upper level divergence. That allows storms to grow and spread and grow. I said grow twice, but you guys know what I'm talking about here. And when we get to about the beginning of the week of the 28th, conditions do start to favor something that's going to have a chance to develop somewhere here in the Western Caribbean. At that point, we'll have high pressure building in above it, and we may see something form. But the next 2 weeks are not looking super favorable. And you can see that here from the European monthly forecast. Over the next week, we have a 60% of normal activity expected here. The following week, though, that climbs, and we're going to be 40% above average. And we still see a storm or two from the end of October through the remainder of the season. So this is 40% higher than that typical average. That number jumps quite a bit. And as we get to the week of November 4th, the European says we are likely to have a storm, and we're in fact 37 or 3.7 times the typical average. If you look at the storm frequency, it's predicting a storm during this period, maybe a strong storm. So that's something we're going to be watching here, and then things start to tail off as we get towards the middle of the month of November. Still a chance for something, but again, our averages are coming down. So to say we're going to be above average, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be looking at mid-season form here. The European ensembles show here a pretty good chance of a depression between today and tomorrow. Interestingly, they're still trying to show something here north of Hispaniola. I think that's possible at this point, but I don't think we're looking at anything major. And then you can see that chance starts to die down as this moves across Cuba early next week. And this system's already moved on to the Pacific at that point. So a lot quieter pattern after that. And then after the 28th, we're going to have to watch this area again to see if things reload. Rainy weather across the southern Gulf, the Northwest Caribbean, and the Southwest Atlantic. And then look at how wet things get here in the beginning of November over the Caribbean. This, to me, does shout that we will have another storm at some point here during the first 10 days of the month. Here's a look at Invest 94L. The thunderstorms are coming back together. We're up to 20% chance. It's not a great chance, but it is still a chance. Milton was a 30% chance a day before it formed, to give you all some perspective. You can see, fortunately, though, the main area of heavy rain is avoiding the islands at this point. It's heading in this direction. We do see some sea breeze activity over the western part of Puerto Rico, some showers as well over the northern leewards, and we're seeing a little bit of an increase in moisture, but really not much wind. So again, this isn't really something to be super concerned with, but it is starting to show a little bit of a look of maybe some organization here at the last minute. We don't have many models still showing much development, but here's where they're taking the system just north of Hispaniola here tomorrow night and towards eastern Cuba by Sunday, and that's really about all she wrote here. Not much strengthening, so maybe a depression, maybe we get Oscar here, but again, nothing super exciting looking. Even the ships is coming down. I know it's showing a Category 1 next week near Jamaica. I don't see that happening at this point, and here's the reason why. The surrounding relative humidity remains near or below 50%, and that is not very favorable for storms to be sustainable. We need to see it at 60 or 70. We see the wind shear does start coming back up here next week as that front approaches. So that is going to kill whatever does try to form. So waters are warm, but we don't have the moisture to get this thing to really grow. So I don't think we're talking Category 1. At the very strongest, I think we're talking about a low-end tropical storm. Here's a look at the GFS model. Here's 95L heading in quickly. This is this time tomorrow, and it's already inland. We don't see an actual circulation here from 94L. We just see some moisture in place, and then things quiet down some next week. Eventually, another wave moves in from the east to west across the Caribbean, and we may see some development at some point in the Western Caribbean at the end of the month. And the GFS, when we look at 16 days out, it can't be really relied upon, but you can see it's not done just yet. The ICON model, this is showing a tropical system forming here tonight or early tomorrow morning. Very short-lived, moving through northern Belize, through the southern Yucatan, and weakening by Sunday. The remains, though, head across Mexico and may try to redevelop here on the Pacific side early next week. Backing this up a little bit, you can see, again, the icon is backed off on having a named system here. It shows some lower pressure, but it's merging with a front and getting drawn northward. Then you see another wave here moving towards the islands at the end of next week. So if you're in the Lesser Antilles, you're going to get in for some wetter weather towards Thursday and Friday of next week. But at this point, nothing showing any signs of organization. Let's look closer here at 95L. And you can see definitely some pretty good thunderstorm development, but a very broad-looking system here. You see there's somewhat of a circulation up here, but the models are showing the low level is going to form down in here and head in this direction. So until these two consolidate, this may remain a potential tropical cyclone. You see on the visible satellite, yeah, there's definitely a lot of rain and thunderstorms coming. We're going to get drenched here in Central America regardless of what forms, but we just don't have a whole lot of organization at this point. So the model is guessing at where that center will form, and you can see in 24 hours, really less than 24 hours, it's already making landfall. So Saturday afternoon, moving into Belize, maybe into southern Quintana Roo here in the Yucatan, and then moving across Guatemala on Sunday, and then moving through far southeastern Mexico Sunday night, Monday, and then into the Pacific, where it's going to be much weaker at that point. Here's a look at our forecast intensity. We do have a model trying to strengthen the system quickly, but until that center forms into a central spot, I just don't see that happening. So it is not far from tropical storm strength, but again, this is assuming that it consolidates and wraps up very quickly. Is that possible? Absolutely. Is it probably going to happen? I don't think so. I think we're more than likely down into this range until the system makes landfall. Here's a look at the halves model just to show you all that. The pressure is staying in the low 1000s, maybe dropping into the 990s, and that's a big maybe. But it's already moving on shore here around lunchtime tomorrow and then weakening after that. That's the halves model. I'm going to show it to you closer here so that you can see that. This is 95L. And again, it's got multiple low pressure systems here kind of doing battle with each other this afternoon. And then eventually this storm moves. And you can see there's multiple centers here. It's trying to pick up on which one develops. But this is tomorrow morning, maybe a tropical storm, and then already weakening by tomorrow afternoon. There's one other model I've been watching. That's the HWRF. And let me take this back just a little bit for you here. There's multiple centers here. There's a center here. There's a center here this afternoon. And then you can see the model's trying to guess which center is going to form. And two centers here. We're going to have a tropical storm intensity, but we're not necessarily going to have one that's classified a tropical storm with this kind of disorganization. It'll try, though. We may get one here at the very last minute here, and then it's moving inland and weakening after that. So here's what the ship's model shows. It does not get it to tropical storm strength until it's moved well past Central America. You can see, though, versus the other system, look at how much more moist that environment is. The other one was down in here. We're up to 75%. So the moisture is definitely in place. The water temperatures are super warm, and the wind shear is relatively low. But the problem that we're going to see with this is that it may be too little too late to get it to form. So I think 70% chance this is Nadine works out pretty well. The other one, 20% chance it's Oscar. I would love to say 100 and 0 at this case, but I'm just not that good. But regardless, we're going to see quite a bit of rain here over the Yucatan, over northeastern Belize, and even into eastern Mexico on the order of 8 to 10 inches, maybe locally 15. If you're in Cuba and in Haiti, we could see between 1 and 3 inches of rain, locally up to 5. Puerto Rico and the islands, generally speaking, an inch or less until you get that heavier mountain thunderstorm. But we definitely need to be watching for the threat for flash flooding across Mexico and Central America, because if somebody does get 15 inches of rain, that's going to be very bad, unfortunately. So that's all I got for you today. We're not going to stew on this much longer. I'll be back on tomorrow afternoon. If things do change, you'll, of course, be the first to know. But I do have some family things I've got to take care of. So I do thank you for your time today. I hope everybody has a blessed weekend, that you're enjoying the weather if you can. Those of you that are cleaning up from the storm, you guys continue to be in my thoughts and prayers. And as always, I want to give God all the glory in giving me this gift to be able to share with you all. Romans 10:8 says, in fact, it says, the message is very close at hand. It is on your lips and in your heart. And that message is the very message about faith that we preach. If you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is by believing in your heart that you are made right with God, and it is by openly declaring your faith that you are saved. As the scriptures tell us, anyone who trusts in him will never be disgraced. And that is why I share the good news with everybody, because I've been disgraced and it ain't fun. I have been at odds with a lot of people. I have put my faith in the wrong things: money, what I looked like, what people thought of me, whatever everyone else believed about me. And you know what? None of that stuff's going to matter eternally. If I've made the choice to be saved because I choose to follow Jesus, then you can too, because that salvation is there for everyone. If you're struggling with that, you are not alone. We all struggle. Those of us of faith struggle. Those who don't have faith yet struggle and wonder what's next. But what I can say is that salvation is for everyone. And I will personally pray for you if you are in a spot where you need that. So I hope everybody has a great day, and I'll be back tomorrow. See you then.